Hi, book nerds. Mary here. Just wanted to do a quick review on The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie. I finished listening to the audiobook this morning and I really enjoyed it. But as you can see, I started this actually December trying to read the physical copy. I annotated it a little bit. And for whatever reason, I've just had a hard time reading his books physical. Look at my bookmark. Isn't that so cute? So I have decided that audiobooks are the way for me to go with Joe Abercrombie's books. And once I switched over to audio, I really started flying through it and thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait to get to the third book in this series, which is the Age of Madness series. It is in the same world as the First Law trilogy. If you haven't read Joe Abercrombie before, he writes grimdark fantasy. And for me, what that means is it's violent. The people are very morally gray at best. Definitely some of them aren't gray. Some of them are definitely worse than others. So I wanted to quickly go through and give you my basically 3-word review with the little details on each word. But first, I wanted to share with you my favorite quote from the book, which I could have chosen from a dozen quotes. There's so many good ones here. But my favorite was, "I find reputations rarely fit people all that well. What are they, after all, but costumes we put on to disguise ourselves? Everyone's wearing a costume, everyone's wearing a mask, especially in these books." So I thought that was an apt description. So I'm putting up a spoiler alert here because the rest of the video will be spoilerish. The first word that I would use, I kind of struggled which one to use, ego or arrogance, because they're both applicable. And a lot of what happens in this book happens because people follow their ego. They're arrogant. Specifically, I hate saying poor Leo, but Leo Danbrock, I think deep down he is trying to be a decent man, but he struggles with himself. It's clear he's bisexual, for example, but in this world that is definitely frowned upon. Not frowned upon is probably, but clearly attracted to his best friend, and he really struggles with that. I think at one point he does find his best friend with another man, and it throws him for a complete loop. Of course, he's married to Savine now. It was set up as a political match. She is pregnant. Is it his child? I don't know that I'm clear that it's his child, but they did have relations. So they're married and they clearly are attracted to each other. I think they start to have feelings, but they're both so ambitious and so arrogant that it's not a good combination, especially when Leo is being manipulated by some of the other members of the Open Council. And so significantly underestimates King Orso and treats him as if Orso is just stupid. And you see a really good example of how wrong he is. They don't know that they're both meeting with King Jappo one night because everyone's wearing masks. How do you not know that the lion mask is Leo? Regardless, Leo, because Jappo is so free sexually, he is intimidated and he doesn't know how to handle him. He has no finesse and he's definitely not good at politics. And so he leaves without getting any sort of agreement with Jappo as to helping them with their uprising against Orso. Well, then here comes Orso, and Orso plays the game. Is himself. He treats King Jappo as a man and just talks to him and they joke around. And of course, Orso wins that night because he knew how to play the game. Now, yes, you can say, well, Orso was raised to be a king. Leo has no skill in that department. And the fact that all of the people in the uprising basically underestimated Orso is telling. they all allowed their own ego, thinking that they were right, that Orso wasn't smart enough or savvy enough or tough enough to be king. They couldn't have been more wrong. So that ego, that arrogance, really was the downfall of the uprising. The second word I thought of was backstabbing, because in a grimdark, you would expect some backstabbing, but there was a lot here, and some of it was a little surprising. The specific one that kind of caught me off guard was Rika. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I just listened to the audiobook and I still can't remember how to say it. Rika, who has the long eye, and she has known Leo since they were children. She agrees to help Leo and Savine in the uprising fight against Orso. She makes it clear that she's not happy that she has to fight with Stour Nightfall from the north because they are enemies, but she says that she will. And they all trust her. Well, the next thing you know, Rika doesn't show up. She and her men, good for her, she and her men go to the north and retake the north while Stour Nightfall is fighting with Orso. And that was, it caught me. It's rare a book can really surprise me, but that did surprise me that she did that, because I thought that her loyalty to Leo would force her to help them. And she's like, nope, I'm doing what's good for my people. And so she goes to the north and she retakes and takes over Stour Nightfall's city. Good for her. The other backstabbing thing that was really clear during the battle was that the Breakers were supposed to help with the uprising, and they never showed. I still have some questions about what's really going on with the Breakers. We'll talk about that a little more later. But yeah, they had agreed to help when Savine sent her representative there, and they didn't show. So backstabbing there. And then we can't leave out Savine, because she's one of my favorite characters, but girl, you need to work on your morals a little bit. She was planning to backstab everyone. She had promised things to Rika, to Jeppo, to everyone, and they all were things that could not go together. So she would promise part of Rika's land to someone else so that they would help with the uprising. It's bound to fall apart. Those games do not work in the long term. You might win the battle, but you're going to lose the war. Turns out they lost the battle. And speaking of battles, my third word is violent. If you can't handle violent language, very descriptive passages about a battle and what happens, men kind of getting that thrill of battle and just becoming mindless, and descriptions of bodies that have been mutilated by axes and swords. And in this case, now they have cannons, so things like that. It is extremely violent. Specifically, the battle between Orso and his army and the uprising led by Leo. The battle, I was like this the entire time. It was so stressful. And then, of course, the people in the uprising, the Open Council, lose that battle. And the description of the leaders being lined up to be hanged, the anticipation that you feel with each person that gets dropped is terrifying. And the fact that Joe Abercrombie can write this and make you feel this as you're reading it or listening to it it's masterful. But you have to be able to handle a lot of that intense violence if you're planning to read these books. So obviously, we're left at the end. At the last minute, Orso did end up sparing Leo's life. Leo is physically, at least, a broken man. He's lost a leg. He doesn't have use of one of his arms now. But Savine, while Orso knows that she was a part of this uprising, she did admit to him that her mother told her that she was his sister, that Savine's mother had an affair with the king, and that was why she could not be with him, even though they had been together. That's why I say it's a very tangled web. So she admits to Orso that she had found this out, and that's why she ended up marrying Leo. that she loved Orso. I think she would have married him when he asked her, but her mother found out and said, "You might not want to marry him. He's your brother." Not pardoning Leo, but commuting his death sentence. It will be interesting to see what happens with that triangle in the last book in this series. So you've got Orso the king, who still loves Savine, but now he knows that she is probably his sister. Savine loved Orso, but now she really loves Leo, and she begged and gave up a lot of her arrogance and her pride to beg Orso to please spare Leo, because she admits that Leo is easily manipulated by both her and by the other members of the Open Council who wanted to do this revolution. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with those three. She still hasn't given birth to her baby, so a lot to still happen in this third book. And then the first of the Magi is such a powerful person, and I felt like he didn't play much of a role in this book. So I'm wondering if that was intentional and something's going to happen in the third book that kind of explains where he's been and what his plans are, because he's always manipulating things behind the scenes. The Breakers, I still have a lot of questions about that. They did not help Leo in the uprising, and we find out at the end another thing that caught me off guard. Pike, who worked for Sandanglocta, who was the let me back up. I hope you've read this if you are listening to all these spoilers, but just to explain if it's been a while and you've forgotten anything, when Sandanglocta, the Archlector, who is Savine's father, he married Savine's mother when she became pregnant by the king, and he has raised Savine as his own, and she just recently found out he's not truly her father. When he finds out that Leo and Savine are part of this uprising, this treason, he says, "I have to resign as Archlector." And so he resigns, and he recommends Pike, his assistant basically, to be the new Archlector temporarily, and Orso says we should just make it permanent. If you know Danglocta, he is extremely intelligent, and it was clear that he had a little smirk when he resigned. But the only thing we hear from him after he resigns is that he and his wife went to the country and he's planning to write some book. I'm not buying that. And with everything going on, something's smelly, something's fishy here. There has to be more to the story of Sandanglocta. And at the very end, Abercrombie threw another twist in there, and Pike takes Vic, another one of the Inquisitors, the spies, and they meet with the Breakers. And we learn that Pike is actually the leader of the Breakers. And he brings Vic in, kind of questioning whether she's truly loyal to the king or will she join them in the Breakers, who are clearly against the king. And Vic, not knowing how to react, but having a good sense of self-preservation, says, "Yeah, I'm with you." I did not expect Pike to be a traitor. The fact that Danglocta recommended Pike was accepted, there has to be an overall plan, I believe, by Danglocta. I could be wrong, but that is what I am anticipating in book 3. And he will find a way to protect Savine and probably Leo, because she loves Leo now. Because against all odds, I truly believe he cares for Savine. Even though she's not his biological daughter, he has raised her to be his. And she knows. She's like, he's my father in all the ways that matter. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. It's not quite a 5-star read for me, partially because I had such a hard time getting through the physical copy, but also because, and this is going to sound nitpicky, but it's always something that bugs me in very violent books where there are battles where men are dying right and left. I don't feel like enough major characters got killed. Does that sound terrible? But if you're in all these battles, we really didn't see any major characters get killed. Ricca's father, Dogman, right? Dogman? He dies off page, but he was really a major character in the first trilogy. But none of the major characters from this trilogy died in the battle. I don't know, that doesn't seem realistic. And I would prefer that we make it real. If you're going to have these extremely violent battles, people have to die. Not just the red shirts, the actual leaders have to die. So we'll see what happens in book 3. Even though I have that one little issue with it, still a 4-star, great read. I highly recommend it. I hope to get to book 3 soon, and I will be listening to it on audio. If you've read this series, let me know what you thought. Talk to you soon. Bye.